NBA.
He's clearly still raw, but I think he's more NBA ready than anyone thought. And he has had moments in those preseason games where he's just like taken over the games, and he'll put up like big lines and even just minutes in the low teens where he'll block like 5 shots. And he's just so long and quick. Clearly, if I was a coach, he'd be like the clear pick to be the backup for Cantor. And I think if you look at some of the other like athletic guys who kind of fit his mold, or I'd like to think fit his mold for what he could be, like Rudy Gobert, and their rookie seasons, they average minutes in like the mid-teens.
Yes.
And I think that is a good standard for getting those guys like ready and like accustomed to the NBA pace. That strategy could work really well. But if someone, I don't know who else would emerge at the 5 to back up Cantor.
I think Luke
more of like a 4.
I think Luke
so
Kornet.
I think he slots in really well in that backup center position and getting those minutes in the mid-teens.
Yeah, I think Luke Kornet might be the backup only because he can shoot the 3, and Fitzdale loves that. He wants his big men shooting 3. That's what he did with Marc Gasol. That's what he did with Chris Bosh. But check this out. All right, you brought up great points. Rudy Gobert, first season in the NBA, he averaged 9.6 minutes in 45 games. Clint Capella, same kind of player. His rookie season, 7.5 minutes. His second year, he only played 19 minutes. DeAndre Jordan, his first season, he averaged 14 minutes a game. Second season, 16 minutes a game. The box score stats aren't great for these guys, but look what they are now. They're all all-stars. They're amazing players, and these are the kinds of centers that exist in today's NBA. I love these kinds of players. I think that's why I love Mitchell Robinson so much. And I say...
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think... it's even the minutes were even lower than I said before than I thought. But yeah, I mean, I think if you watched those guys play in their first years, particularly I'm thinking of Gobert, like you could just tell that. I mean, he was just so talented, and anyone who was watching him, I mean, he just passed the eye test. And I think
Right.
It's the same sort of thing with Robinson. You can see he's just oozing with talent and just like making sure he's getting enough minutes. I think there's a danger in setting him down to the G League, and that he's not going to get accustomed to the NBA pace in the same way that he would if he was getting like 10 minutes off the bench. So I think I'd almost rather see him do that than just like dominate the G League.
I say let him back up Cantor, play Cantor 30 minutes a game, play Mitchell Robinson the other 16, 18 minutes a game. Give him all the minutes he can handle. If he fouls out in 18 minutes, cool, I don't care. But have him play his heart out for the minutes he's out there. If he does foul out, whatever, we'll sub him for Noah Vonleh or Luke Kornet. But just give him the minutes to just go and play his absolute best in that time. And if he fouls out in 10 minutes, who cares? I mean, he'll get better, he'll learn, but I say give him the minutes. I'm actually more excited for him than I am Kevin Knox, believe it or not, because he has the potential to be a Rudy Gobert or a Clint Capella. And, God, I love those players.
It's definitely exciting.
So we've kind of touched on all the new players. We'll get to Kevin Knox in a minute, but we've talked about Fitzdale and Scott Perry. What's your worst-case scenario for the Knicks?
Man, I think worst-case scenario is that we bring Porzingis back too early, or we make some sort of mistake there, and he comes back on the court and he just is not right. And like going into the next offseason, I think it's pretty important that prospective free agents think that and know that KP is back to what he was before the ACL.
Is there any kind of like blessing in disguise with Porzingis' injury? Or is it just
I think
all
if
bad?
you look at what happened with like the Celtics last year, where Hayward went down during that first game and you immediately saw like Jaylen Brown was thrust into a role that like he was never supposed to be put in that early, and same thing with Tatum.
Right.
And they really stepped up and were much better than people thought they were going to be. So I think like when you see these guys go down, you see other guys step up. And like I think it's going to be good for Knox's growth that he's going to be the number one option or close to it. He's going to be up there in a way that he wouldn't if KP were around. So I think there could be some sort of blessing in disguise in that sense because KP definitely carried us in the games that we won last year. Kind of
like last year with Michael Beasley, except instead of an old, washed-up player, it's a young, exciting, promising player.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy who we haven't talked about yet is Zoe, who I think is like maybe the new Michael Beasley. And yeah, I mean he seems like he fits that same just like put the ball in the cup mentality.
Right.
As Beasley. I think he's the new Beasley.
Yeah, Alonzo's had a great preseason. So now what's your best case scenario besides them winning the championship? Because we know that's not going to happen. Otherwise, what's your best case scenario?
Best case, Frank takes a major step. He's already elite defensively. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, and I don't have them in front of me, but in terms of him defending the pick and roll.
Not even numbers.
Last year.
Not even numbers, but listen to all the point guards. All these point guards, like Kyrie Irving, all the elite point guards are saying crazy good things about him.
Yeah, but he also just gets into the passing lanes in a way I haven't really seen people, particularly rookies, do so effectively. So that's pretty exciting. But I think he is a really passive player right now, and it's hard to really project him because he's so young, just turned 20. And he's so long, but I think if he gains a little bit more confidence in his jump shot, takes the ball to the rack, he's just so freakishly athletic that he's going to develop these offensive skills, but it's clearly not quite in his comfort zone yet. So I think if he stepped up and shot the ball a little bit better and showed some more aggressiveness on offense, that would be nice to see him acknowledged as a clear prospect that fits in with KP. And our point guard of the future. I think that would definitely be part of the best case. And I think Knox, all these guys taking a step. I know the best case could be us making the playoffs or whatever, but I think if Knox takes a nice step and shows particularly some defensive aptitude and skills and willingness to move, because I know there have been questions about his motor in college. So putting those questions to rest. We know he's got the offensive skills from preseason. But yeah, taking that step defensively and showing that he can be a two-way player, because that's really what it's going to take for him to be a star in the NBA. And then obviously KP coming back and showing particularly anyone who's thinking about coming to the Knicks, of which there are clearly a few pretty solid NBA players thinking about it, showing anyone who's thinking about coming that he is exactly what he was. He's going to be this freakish 7-footer who's just a force on both ends of the court.
So Kevin Knox, to me, I feel like his motor doesn't need to be questioned. Think about who he was on Kentucky. He was the fourth option. He was a spot-up three-point shooter. They didn't need him to do a whole lot. He didn't need to focus and put a whole lot of energy into the game. Now he will, and I think he's going to show everyone that he has this skill. I think, if anything, his skill is a little in question because he didn't do a whole lot on the court in games for Kentucky. He didn't need to. So now he does. I think we'll start to see his motor, his work ethic, and his skill all combined into one.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, there were a lot of other people on that Kentucky team. But, and like we were saying before, maybe the Porzingis injury is a blessing in disguise in that way, and that it's really going to thrust him into the limelight, and he's going to be the top option on offense. Yeah, I think that's going to be good for him.
Would best case scenario be the Knicks making the playoffs?
Yeah, I guess it would be nice to see us be back in the playoffs.
As a Knicks fan, it would be fun to see them in the playoffs again, but wouldn't that kind of hurt their future? Do you think that's what's best for the team?
Yeah, if the Knicks make the playoffs, that means that all these young guys have taken big steps forward. I know the East is weaker than it was last year with LeBron leaving, but if they make the playoffs, yeah, I think that would be the best case scenario, because that would mean that all these guys are legit NBA players, or at least enough of them are to make the playoffs. So I think that would definitely be a best case scenario. But I'm also fine with what I think is a much more likely scenario, that they win 25 to 30 games and KP comes back, he looks healthy. It feels like Frank, Kevin, Knox, Mitchell, some of these guys have taken steps, and we're ending up with a top 5 pick heading into the 2019 offseason with a really good shot to sign one of these max guys who's going to be available.
See, here's my worst case scenario, is that the Knicks just miss the playoffs and they end up with that 10 to 13 lottery pick, where that pick isn't going to get us an all-star caliber player, but we're also going to miss the playoffs. That's, I think, the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you're right. The players, they take the steps they need to take. Hardaway averages 20 points a game. Knox averages 15, 5 and 5. Frank averages 10 points, 5 assists, 2 steals. Mitchell Robinson becomes this defensive force. But because none of these guys are big-time players, they lose every game until Porzingis comes back. And then with a month and a half left in the year, we ease him back into his role. And that last month, he's playing 30 minutes a game, putting up MVP numbers, like 22 points, 10 boards, 2 threes, 2 blocks a game. He meshes well with Knox and Hardaway and Mitchell Robinson and Cantor, and we start winning games because he's back. And then players see in free agency that we start winning because of Porzingis, so they'll want to come to the team in free agency in the offseason. But we were so bad in the beginning of the year that we end up with a top 3 draft pick anyway. So going into next year, we have Porzingis, Frank, Knox, Mitchell Robinson off the bench, plus our top 3 draft pick and a superstar free agent. That's my best case scenario.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of coming out between both of our best cases here is just that making New York a destination,
right?
Which it seems like we're working ourselves into that conversation with Bocker saying he wanted to come here, and Kyrie mentioned it when he wanted to leave the Cavs last year. Yeah, just like working ourselves back into that conversation of where the top free agents want to go.
First game is what, Wednesday? First game of the season?
Yeah, we're playing the Hawks, right?
Yeah, the Hawks. We actually might win that one. they're one of the few teams worse than us. We get to see Trae Young's first game, and kind of speaking of first games, you were at Michael Jordan's first game at post-retirement when he was on the Wizards. What do you remember from that night?
Yeah, I was pretty young. I was like 9 years old, but I remember just like that feeling of excitement because I had never seen Jordan play, and that was the only time I ever saw Jordan play. But I remember going up the escalator in the Garden, how excited everyone was, and like when Jordan first walked out, he got like this big standing O. But I remember, I mean, like, you know how it is in the Garden. I think that was like the first moment I really understood the Garden, or started to understand the Garden, where we gave him that first standing O. But as soon as the game started, whenever he touched the ball, he was getting boos. I remember he had like an air ball at some point in the first quarter. I think he was still trying to shake off the rust. And all of the Garden started chanting like air ball. And so, yeah, I think that was like really my big introduction to like being a Knicks fan and like what being a Knicks fan meant, because I was excited to watch Jordan, as like a 9-year-old, never seen him before. But once it was game time, like he was the enemy, and we ended up winning that game. But yeah, it was a fun experience getting to see him play.
Who did you go to the game with?
Yeah, I went with my dad. I've been going to the Knicks games with my dad, I think for like about 20 years at this point. So I don't think I've ever really been to a Knicks game without him at the Garden.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's true, actually.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Not only did he take you to Michael Jordan's first game as a Wizard, but he also took you to Kwame Brown's first game of all time. So...
NBA legend Kwame Brown.
Oh, man. Now, I know you remembered like the atmosphere being the game, but do you remember any of the Knicks players who played in that game?
Not really. I mean, I remember that they won. It was a close game. I think they won by 2.
Yeah, they did.
But yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Sprewell. I think he was still on the team in 2001, right?
Oh, yeah. That game, he had 28 points, led the entire game. Jordan only had 19. I have the box score up here. He had 19 points, 5 boards, 6 assists. He had 4 steals. But then you look at Sprewell, he had 28 points, 5 boards. Allen Houston in that game had 22 and 6 boards. Do you remember any of the other players on that team? Or do you want me to list off some?
Man, not really, to be honest. But man, I think we got to introduce someone else into the GOAT discussion. Spree, man.
Spree. He was my favorite player on the Knicks. I think his tomahawk dunks and his ferocity was just, it was so much fun to watch. Looking at this box score,
my favorite too.
You want to hear some fun names? This was Mark Jackson's second stint with the Knicks. This was when he went. I think he went to the Pacers, then he came back to the Knicks. I don't think I ever liked him. I think he's one of those Knicks players I've always disliked. I think because I remember him more as a Pacer than I do as a Knick. But Kurt Thomas was on that team.
Kurt Thomas.
Our starting center, at least I think he's a center because I don't know who this guy is. Felton Spencer. Do you remember that guy at all?
Not at all.
Not at all. Hold on. Let's see his stats here, his career stats. He doesn't even have a picture on Basketball Reference. He actually had a long career. 13 seasons, kind of a journeyman. He started out on the Timberwolves, then went to the Jazz, half a season with Orlando,